Nightwing issue 105, Tom Taylor writing, Bruno Redondo on the art, and this has got a gimmick to it. This is the POV issue, where every panel is from Nightwing's perspective. And they set that up early with him waking up next to Babs, the dog coming and licking him, and then him brushing his teeth in the mirror. And, there's a crisis to deal with. There's a train that's been hijacked with some villains. And they really focus on like the trip there this time, because obviously they wanted to draw like the POV shots of swinging through the city with Babs in front of them, which is all very pretty. I mean, the art's obviously one of the highlights of this issue.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, Redondo here is really doing some good stuff, because Nightwing, you still see him, right? It's through reflections.
Yeah,
you can follow the action very well. So that scene where they jump out to go catch the train, right, and we get the perspective of him behind Babs, and she's getting ready to land, and then you look at the train platform, and there's reflections from the windows, right, and you could see them, and it's just, he's doing really good things with the angles here. Like, it is almost like an exercise.
Somewhat controversially, I don't love this issue for that. For the gimmick, I compared to the previous gimmick issue, right? Because that obviously did the all one shot gimmick before.
The oneer.
Which I thought was excellent. I thought the art flowed incredibly well. In this, I felt the gimmick taking me out of the issue multiple times, where I felt like, oh yeah, we're just doing, like it felt occasionally like it was constrained by having to be, from this one shot. Yes, it was getting creative, but I felt it as I felt from an outside perspective of the story.
Well, here's my thing: is as I was reading it, I was enjoying the story, and obviously it's what was the Double Dare were the villains,
Double Dare,
right? And so it's Single Dare, so it's just one of them that's on the on the train. And there's some banter about, she missed being chased and grabbed by Nightwing, and Babs gives him like grabbed and chased, right? Yeah. So I was enjoying the antics, and it's like, okay, they're actually doing something good, because they're smuggling this vaccine that this evil corporation wants to charge this country for, that they need. Yeah, blah blah blah. All fine stuff, and I'm enjoying the story. But there was something in the part of my mind that I was going, is there any reason why this particular issue should be POV? And when I first started thinking that, I didn't really have an answer until it got to the company, and I got, okay, that's why this issue is POV, because it's all building up to him meeting the alternate identity of Heartless, right? Which, by the way, I'm glad they told me, because as much as I really enjoyed that annual with his backstory, I would have never remembered his name.
I completely forgot his name.
Yeah.
And I forgot that he was the heir to a pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. I remember him being the area rich guy, like I remember him.
Yeah, a rich guy, but not the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. So but, it works well enough. It's like, okay, yeah, I remember being told that story. Yeah, this makes sense. But this, like, meeting of him for the first time, like, I was like, okay, I think that's why this one's in POV, because it's all building up to that moment where you see him, and it hits who it is. So I think I get what it's doing, and I think it's effective enough in what it is doing.
I get where you come from. I personally don't feel like this added anything to that meeting that wouldn't have been there with Redondo's normal artistic license. I don't think it added anything particularly unique that was like, we needed this interaction this way. And I just, like I felt the framing device as a hindrance, as something Redondo was working around and being creative to get around the restrictions of it throughout the issue. And I found myself noticing that, this is all just one, this is all a gimmick, as opposed to enjoying the story. Because I think the story in the issue is still good. Like, it's still like every other issue of Nightwing, right? It's solid. It's enjoyable. I enjoy all the character interactions. I'm enjoying Dick and Babs. I'm enjoying what they're doing with the villains, and they're doing the good thing. And I'm enjoying this meeting with Heartless's alter ego. But I think I'd have enjoyed it more if I wasn't constantly being like, but why am I in POV?
I didn't have that problem, and I think part of it is because, to me, when you have an idea like this, a restriction as you put it, part of it is working around the restriction to make the story. And I think when you have to work around the restriction in an artistic way, and whether that's, we can only do all this in this one type of shot, or we can only do all this in this one way, to me, that breeds like a different type of creativity they don't usually get forced into, and that can lead to some interesting, like, different ways of doing things.
I get that. I think part of my problem is it's a self-imposed restriction that it's only there for the gimmick. It's only there so they can market this as the POV issue. There is no creative reason for that. I don't feel.
I mean, like, again, there's no story necessity that it had to be first person, but I like to think there was Redondo going, can I do a whole issue from Dick's perspective?
It might be like a personal creative challenge. Absolutely.
So, and I think he executes it. And but I'm just trying to think, what would have been the reason that this had to be first person? Like, is he trying something, new? It doesn't. I can't think of one.
I think it does work by the end, because I think it makes this meeting with Heartless feel like, I think you'll remember that even better than you would have done, because it's the first person issue. I think your mind's going to link those two things together really easily, and you'll remember that first moment where he met him. Like, I do genuinely think that'll work, because it kind of, when it hit me who he was meeting here at the company, because I didn't see it coming. It did come out of nowhere, but in a good way, where it didn't feel like a cheat. It was like,
right.
Oh no.
Well, but then they reminded you too that this was his bully that he stuck up for, when he was younger too. So he knows who this guy is,
I really like this dialogue in this, the back and forth, the Mr. Wing. Oh, it's one word, all that. And, the ending, I'll be like me calling you Mr. Hole.
Yeah.
I like all that. But I felt like that's a perfect example where I can see the restriction of, to show us Nightwing's smirk while he's saying it, like you have to do it in the reflection of the door. And I'm like, I feel like I'd have probably preferred that if it was just a normal panel where we're seeing this smirk and we're seeing this, back and forth between them without the awkward, there's a line in the middle of his face, because that's where the line on the door is. It just feels like a distraction to me.
I can't agree with that. I think this is a self-imposed challenge, and one that I think works. I think if they said, the rest of the run's going to be like this, I'd be giving them some side eye, like, why? But it's doing a single chapter like this. This is no different to me than Mr. Robot saying, we want to do an episode that's in CinemaScope, or Fringe saying, we're going to do an animated episode. And sometimes, like, because Mr. Robot especially had, like, probably a good half dozen, like, gimmick episodes over the course of its run, and some of them worked better thematically than others to what the story was doing in those episodes, but there's not a single one of them that I regretted. All of them were enjoyable for the experience of it doing something different for one chapter, and I think that works here as well, where I'm going to remember the events of this issue in a way that I wouldn't have, because it stands out uniquely because of how it was told.
But see, this is the thing, I don't think it stands out that unique. I don't think this is anywhere near as memorable as the one-shot issue.
I disagree there, because again, I like for Redondo, it's an exercise in perspective, right? He has to do everything right, so he can still us Dick's smirk, but he does it in the reflection.
He can, right?
So it's just a different way of doing things.
And I don't even. Again, I want to make it clear, I don't think this is a bad issue. I like all the stuff in this issue. I like all the art in this issue. I just feel like I would have liked it equally as much, just the sheer content of it and the way it's drawn, I would have liked equally as much if it had been drawn normally, and I'd have had extra enjoyment because I wouldn't have had, this is a gimmick issue the whole time I was reading it in my head, which took me out of the experience.
I think I enjoy seeing how, like, for me, part of this is, like, enjoying seeing how they do the challenge, like, watching for how he deals with these moments that you would just do another way if you were doing a normal issue, and seeing how he works around it is part of the fun for me, especially as someone who has now read a lot of comic books. I enjoy seeing the kind of how are they going to pull this off this way, in the same way that when I'm watching, like, a movie scene and I'm like, what's an example? This isn't exactly the same thing, but think of like Jaws, right? Where it's like, oh shit, the shark looks terrible. We now have to work around it, right? And obviously, I'm not saying this is as successful as that, because that, famously made that movie 10 times better because they were hiding and it was more scary because of it. I think in a similar vein, though, you get this different, you get a different style for an issue.
I get that, and I think, like, to counteract that again, that's not a restriction that they chose. That was something that was forced upon them by the budget.
In that case, sure, but there's definitely several where it is a chosen restriction, where someone decides to write a script where it's a movie set in one room. No one forced them to do that, but they made that choice, and they'll like I just recently watched 12 Angry Men again. Like, that wasn't written that way because there was a restriction in mind, right? I'm sure maybe it was a stage play at first, and that was...
Yeah, I think it was a stage play, but regardless...
Yeah, but plays have multiple locations, though, often. It's not that...
Right, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They still chose to put it in that super hot, steamy room and make you feel like you were in there with those 12 guys.
Yeah. So... And then all of the direction of like making it the scenes exciting, despite the fact that we never leave this dull, basic ass room, is part of the challenge, and it kind of forces.
I don't disagree with any of that. I just think this doesn't have enough of a reason to be a POV issue. There's not enough unique going on. Like, if this was an issue where we really need to be inside Nightwing's head, like in a metaphorical sense, then to do that in the literal sense as well would be a great, a great way of pairing that.
The only thing that's missing for me is an actual reason for it, like,
which is why I think, like, if you can back this up with a reason, it stops being a gimmick and starts becoming a narrative function.
But then again, you have to look at the winner and why was that told that way?
Because that flowed, right? That had this sense of it was
regular.
That did have a reason. It was this flowing chase. It was this non-stop.
Because you could do it. They could have done a chase scene any other way.
You could do that with a regular comic issue as well. It doesn't need to.
Of course you can, but like that again, like there was a narrative function in that. It's really reinforcing this chase. It's reinforcing this non-stop flow. This doesn't reinforce anything for me. There is no deeper thing that it's adding.
Well, let me add some stuff to this then, because I will say there is something this does because of its style that's a little bit different than normal. There is a lot more time, I feel, because of the perspective, really focusing on the facials of whoever he's looking at. So you get it with Single Dare, you get it with Babs, and like her, and some of them are fun, of course, but it's her like, hey, teasing him about the, when she, because obviously part of the plan is for Babs to dress up in the Single Dare.
I'm not complaining. Basically off of that, we get Babs as a Double Dare. Yeah. So that works because
they set it up like, hey, if only we knew another redhead that could pretend to be this character, and then cut to her in the outfit, and she's like, hey, how do I look? And he's like, I'm not going to answer that. That feels like a trap. And he's like,
that's a trap. Yeah.
She's like, good response. Actually, on that subject, I love the little detail of the speech bubbles for Nightwing, where it was inverted, where it was going in the way. I thought that was a neat little touch because it's a nice lettering POV.
Yeah, and obviously, I think it was a smart lettering choice. Just on a functional level, to always have it with the blue outline. Because obviously, we've got no dialogue arrow for to lead us to it, so it's always just a very clear, no, this is Nightwing's speech.
So what I'm getting at though is that you're reading this villain's face, this person who's typically a villain but is doing something more or less for a good reason, and is taking this train because she's trying to save her sister who's been kidnapped, and so much of it's about reading her and trusting that she's telling the truth so that they'll help her do the right thing, even though she's typically a bad guy. And I think the reason why it works for the Heartless meeting is, even though he doesn't know he's heartless, this moment at the end, he's having to try and read who this person is just on his face. And obviously it ends with him calling him an asshole, effectively, to sort of get the sense that he has got a good idea of how much of a prick this guy is. Obviously, he's not sussed that he's this, stone cold killer who's stealing hearts. But I think setting it up as this idea, this is the issue where he's having to like rely on his judgment of people based on reading their faces and how they talk to him. I think that does back up why this is the POV issue. And and I think starting with Babs is the one that we already know that he can trust, who is someone who's close to him, who we don't have to worry
Babs
about.
And Bitewing.
And Bitewing, right? But we don't have to worry about reading them because we know. So that gives you a baseline. That's your baseline for someone that he's looking at. And then you have someone who is a bit villainous, but ultimately here is doing something for a good reason.
Yeah, she's a hired gun, so therefore, he brings up how they've had run-ins with her earlier in the run.
The point is that it's all stepping stones to get into the one that he just cannot, under any circumstance, trust. And it's about reading that on his face. So I think that's probably the thematic logic behind why this is the POV issue. Because I was definitely noticing, like, a few of the moments where like Babs would turn and look at him, it was really kind of a weird perspective compared to normal because of the POV, and it was really making me focus on the nuances of like the look she was throwing him in a way that's different to normal, so that's my defense. I don't know if it holds up, but that's where
I
I'm
think
from.
it's not like it's not a terrible defense. It's again, it's not bad. It's not enough to justify it for me because that's nothing you couldn't just do with close-up panels anyway. For me, so I don't think for me it adds enough to get to justify the gimmick still. But at the end of the day, I just don't think I don't think you're gonna convince me that it did.
The only thing I would add on to that though is that the point is though is you're thinking about it more because of the gimmick, because you're looking at it from a different perspective. That's the one thing I'd add on to that, is that yes, you can theoretically obviously have those same feelings from regular comic panels if you were going to do it that way. But I think the point is that this wants you to be constantly thinking about how you're looking right into people's faces. Because you are looking right into people's faces.
You are, and I think it's for me, you're achieving the same feeling with, like I'm not using, you don't have to use a 9-panel grid, but 9-panel grids of facial reactions is kind of evoking the exact same response where you're focusing on the micro expressions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a reason why comics have largely done it a different way for a long time, but I have no problem with this. Even if this is an experiment that no one thinks succeeded, I think it was a perfectly valid experiment to do, and I will remember beats of this in a way that's different to normal because of the way it was done.
That's fair. It's definitely a valid experiment. I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. I'm just saying, for me personally, I'd have preferred it. I would have enjoyed this issue more without the gimmick. If it was exactly the same content, but redrawn in Redondo's normal presentation, I would have enjoyed it slightly more. But that doesn't make it a bad issue.
You want to rate it, Matt?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna go 8.5, but I'm it's kind of knocking on the door, Matt. I didn't really like this issue. I love
at least a half a point was for the Bab stuff.
Yeah,
so.
The playfulness with Babs and their relationship was great. The heartless meet at the end was great. Like, I think the Babs almost falling off the train because she misjudged the speed of both of them going at the same time. And, those were all just fun little bits. Yeah.
And him catching her in the way that she looks up, like not worried because she knew. She's like, I knew you get me, Boy Wonder. Yeah.
Good. All right. What are you rating it, Connor?
Madness. 7.5.
Let's see where the audience lies on that debate, shall we?